Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Have you ever walked into a house and it looked so much smaller from the outside than it was on the inside? I think that's how our view of God is sometimes. We look at God through the lens of our problems and everything going on, and then all of a sudden, He shows up and we're like, oh, God, you are so much bigger than I gave you credit for. Welcome to the Bible for Busy People. I'm Erica, your host, and yeah, we are continuing to explore in God's medicine cabinet this week, part 2, because there are so many prescriptions for what ails you and I in life. Today, let's dive into God's prescription for when you feel overwhelmed. Hand in the air. I often feel overwhelmed by my daily responsibilities, not enough time in the day, by the mountains. I'm praying that God will move in my life. But I think when you and I sit here and pitch a tent with Jesus sitting beside us eating s'mores, we're going to feel more peaceful. But look, here comes a woman who looks overwhelmed. Let's make room for her here in the tent too. Let's meet Martha in Luke chapter 10, beginning in verse 38. As Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Point for Martha, right? She recognizes this is a special person and says, come on in. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he taught. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. But the Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. Jesus gently rebukes our friend Martha here, who I know you and I identify with more than Mary. Mary chose what was best. Now, is Jesus saying to never do anything, to never check off items on your to-do list and just sit at his feet all day? I don't think that's the message of this story, but I understand what he's saying. He's saying you would do well to spend time with me, to incorporate that into your day. By the way, what you're doing right now, you are listening to this podcast and you're making space for the Christ, for your Lord in your life today. It's not easy to set things aside to do that. So well done you. You're actually pulling a Mary here. You're doing something that will not be taken away from you. So how do we get our eyes off the problems, the mountains that I was describing earlier, like waiting for a medical diagnosis for my son? That's a mountain in my life. How do we get past the to-do list of today and live a worry-free life? Well, the remedy is not going to surprise you, but it really does work every time. It's prayer. How does Jesus want us to pray? Well, join me now. I really think you're going to feel more peaceful after you hear this. Matthew chapter 6 now, beginning in verse 6. And by the way, we're reading the Message version of the Bible now. This is Jesus speaking to you. Hear him speaking to you. Here's what I want you to do. Find a quiet, secluded place so you won't be tempted to role play before God. Just be there as simply and honestly as you can manage. The focus will shift from you to God, and you will begin to sense his grace. The world is full of so-called prayer warriors who are prayer ignorant. They're full of formulas and programs and advice, peddling techniques for getting what you want from God. Don't fall for that nonsense. This is your Father you are dealing with, and he knows better than you what you need. With a God like this loving you, you can pray very simply like this: Our Father in heaven, reveal who you are. Set the world right. Do what's best, as above, so below. Keep us alive with 3 square meals. Keep us forgiven with you and forgiving others. Keep us safe from ourselves and the devil. You're in charge. You can do anything you want. You're ablaze in beauty. Yes, yes, yes. And I'd like to add my own yes to that beautiful prayer. Did you hear what Jesus was saying? When you start to put your eyes on God, you take your eyes off yourself, your problems. Things begin to shift as you sense the grace of God moving into your life, as you remember who is in charge, who is sovereign, in control of everything. You and I are in control of nothing, but we're deeply loved by the one who is in control. I want to continue now in Matthew chapter 6. We're going to jump down to verse 26. I love this verse. Look at the birds, Jesus says, free and unfettered, not tied down to a job description, careless in the care of God. And you count far more to him than birds. For the sake of time, we're going to jump down now to verse 33. Steep your life in God reality, God initiative, God provisions. Don't worry about missing out. You'll find all your everyday human concerns will be met. Give your entire attention to what God is doing right now, and don't get worked up about what may or may not happen tomorrow. God will help you deal with whatever hard things come up when the time comes. Steep yourself like a tea bag in the waters of God's grace and love, and you won't feel so overwhelmed. Until next time, you're really loved. Thank you for making time for the Bible for Busy People today. If being part of this community is a blessing to you, it's super easy to share this podcast with someone you love. We're all about spreading the hope of Jesus like butter. So if you've got a moment to write a review, boy, we'd really appreciate that. Maybe you need a little prayer today, or you're ready to take that next step with God. I invite you to check out our show notes. You're going to find lots of encouragement there. This podcast is one branch on a tree called Purposely, a podcast network designed with practical podcasts to help you find and thrive in God's purpose for your life. If you've got a pulse, you've got a purpose.